All right, let's make a textured pot, and we're going to use slab strips. And this is going to be a full-length video, so settle in. All right, I've got some pre-rolled strips here. These are just left over from a project I worked on yesterday, which is this pot here. And this is a small casserole pot. It's on its way to being bone dry. And we're just going to be working on a slightly smaller version, I think, but we'll see how it turns out. Okay, so let me get myself set up here a little bit. I have a bunch of slabs that I rolled out, and what I'm going to be doing now is just compressing them a little bit and getting the canvas texture out of them. I'm also compressing just to make sure that everything is strengthened, because when you roll out clay, it pulls apart those clay platelets and can weaken your slab walls. So compressing after stretching is a really good idea. Okay, so I have this piece of paper here because once I rib them, I don't want them to have a texture in them, although I am now getting a weird crinkly paper texture here because I'm using this cheap newsprint. So now I'm thinking that I'm gonna put a piece of plastic down. I've been meaning to get something else to work on besides these canvas boards that I have. Okay, so that's working a little bit better, but now I have a plastic texture. So it's not going to be that big of a deal. So we're going to leave it like that for now. And I just kind of want to show you what I'm going to be experimenting with. I have a bunch of texture tools. Some of them are handmade. This one is not handmade. This is an MKM roller, and I use this one a lot. I really love how the variety of marks in here can easily line up and be combined with other things. And then I have a bunch of handmade texture tools that I've made here. And these are all bisque. So I just wash them off after they get a little bit dirty. And sometimes I just am screwing around in the studio and I want to be working with clay. I want to have my hands busy. I might be listening to a podcast, who knows? And I just kind of pound these little pieces into shapes and then let them firm up, and then I'll just begin to carve on them. And sometimes they turn out great, sometimes they don't. I'm very much an abstract artist when I paint, and I find that that's what lends itself to my pottery as well. So this is the end of a chime right here. You can see it has a hole in it. I just never added it onto the end of the chime that I made. I sometimes make a lot of chimes because I really liked the texture that was on here, so I've kept this as a texture tool. All right, so on these guys, we're just gonna be seeing what we want to use, and then we're gonna cut the pieces out for our actual pot. But I think experimentation is a really important part of learning. You can also do these and then cut them up and save them for, glaze testing, underglaze testing. You can put holes in them and use them for chimes. You can, you know, you don't have to just recycle the clay or toss the clay afterwards. All right, so let's take a look and see what's happening here. So this clay is a little firm, and that's making a nice mark there. I could repeat that. I could, and I gotta admit, guys, I am not super scientific about stuff. I'm very, like I said, I'm an abstract artist, and I just kind of go with the flow. So I find that that's much more enjoyable for me, and then I don't stress about the end product. And if I'm in my zone, then the end product turns out pretty good. Right now, I'm just looking at what I want surface decoration to look like. And I'm not really sure what that is. So I know what all of these stamps look like, but sometimes after a while of not using them, I forget what they actually look like in clay. So, and sometimes what looks cool on the surface of something does not look cool on the surface of clay. So, and it depends on what you're doing, you know? And like I said, these are all kind of rando. I do like the interior of this, but I don't like the exterior of it. If I was to do this again, I'd be more thoughtful, and I would prefer just to have something that looks like that. But too late for that. That's kind of a thought or a mental note for later. This is kind of a nice stamp. I really have an affinity for the Japanese culture, and as well as Japanese pottery. And so the philosophy of wabi-sabi is, you know, to not overthink it and let the clay be what it is. And sometimes for some folks, that is a scary prospect because we want to always be refining and making things perfect. But really, making things with your hands is an imperfect process. Also, using my stamps, I find that it reminds me of the hardness or softness of clay that I need to be using when I'm making something. Just even the edge of this is really nice. So I like the organic nature of the edge, and I'm going to try each edge. Maybe each edge has a different look to it. And maybe topping it off is, I don't know, maybe separating that out. Kind of hard to know unless you experiment with it. I'm just kind of curious if this is the same. So I don't really like that. And I have, oh gosh, dozens and dozens and dozens of these. These are just ones that I pulled out for today. What if some were stripes and some weren't? And so layering over the top can be interesting as well. All right, let's see what else I got here. I've got this round one, which I do like, and it just kind of is symbolic of like tree branches for me. I love nature, and you can see I've used it in the bottom of this pot here. Just, I don't know, is something kind of fun in the bottom, but not something that I would probably use on a strip. Hard to say. I feel like I'd have to be really careful about spacing and pressure, and I don't know. Then I have this interesting one, which is kind of a rainbow with this little piece was just an extra piece of clay, and I just continued that carving down. So if we press in and roll back, we have an interesting kind of look there. Or I could just use the top too. And I could create a pattern out of this that is something like that maybe. or it could be something like this, which I like this right here a lot, like a lot. So right now I'm leaning towards this one, although I do notice that I need to make sure that I'm pushing in the bottom a little bit better. Yeah, I like how this looks right here. And then let's see about this guy right here. I don't know, that's not really working for me. So something else that can be done, and I'll flip this over again because I can riv this out and kind of reuse it, although the clay is getting a little hard now. If this was softer clay, I could cut a piece this shape. All right, let's see about this here. And again, we're just kind of spitballing, so I'm not too concerned about being neat and tidy or making something for real. What I want is to experiment. And for me, experimenting means I need the freedom to explore. And exploring for me means I'm not worried about the outcome, because then I'm trying to make something and I don't know, for me trying just doesn't work so well, guys. I've got to be intentional and come in with a plan. Sometimes I just go in and make whatever, but for the most part, if it's an exploration day, I'm just exploring. If it's a making day, I've already figured it out. And if I haven't figured it out and I just need to make something, then I'm going to go back to making something that is very rote for me and I don't have to think much about. So that was kind of fun. If you're familiar with sprig molds or press molds, that's very similar to how that works. So that could be something, this obviously is in the way, but this could be something that could be added on to another shape. This could also if it was refined and thoughtfully made, it could be a chime part, but it could also end up being like a part of a bracelet, you know? That would be really beautiful. Maybe make these smaller, but that's what investigating is all about, right? Okay, so I have figured out what I want to do, and that means I'm going to clean up here, move my stuff aside, and start the process of making. Okay. So this guy, this is what I'm going to do right here. I may or may not use this piece of clay. So what I'm going to do is just wrap it up. I'm going to give it a little spritzy poo. And save it for later. And this guy right here, I'm going to spray and wrap up with it because I can hydrate this, wedge it up, and use it for something else. Alrighty. So this is a slab I rolled out, I don't know, 30 minutes ago, 40 minutes ago. And it's summertime here in Rocklin, California. which is in Northern California, Placer County. And we've had a very mild summer, thank goodness. However, today is going to be in the 90s. So my air conditioning is out in my studio, as is some of my electrical. I don't know why, but these things happen. And so I got up early this morning to get this video done. Then I had all sorts of problems getting my camera set up. I don't know why either. During distance learning, I had made oodles and oodles of videos for my students when I was a high school ceramic teacher. And I bought this really inexpensive overhead camera. And so the videos look very inexpensive. And so I've kind of been on this mission to remake videos that are of a higher quality. And although those videos were very instructive, I just don't think that having a time lapse on all of your videos is cool. And that's kind of basically what was happening, is like my hands are moving slow and it's pretty bad. So I got a new setup. I upgraded my iPhone, and this is happening over the course of time. And I've been trying different setups, different ways to do things, and you know, figuring out how to make higher quality videos. All right, this is gonna go in the recycle bag. This time of year has to get sprayed all the time. So I rolled out my bases to a little less than 3/8 of an inch, and that's too thick for the walls. So I'm gonna roll this out a little bit more, and then I'm gonna go ahead and begin the texture process. I cut out the bases. These are gonna be kind of small, and I'm hoping they end up taller, but I cut out these two bases because I want them to firm up a little bit before I put the tops on them. I also need to, I'm just gonna rib out the bottom of these. I'm kind of a messy potter. Things get uglier before they get prettier. Okay, let's set those guys aside. Roll this guy out. Now, when you're rolling slabs, you definitely want to rotate everything, but also try not to roll hard off the end of a slab, because that gives you a really thin edge there, and I can't tell you how many times I've needed that length. All right, that feels nice. Feel any lumps or anything. So the same process, cleaning both sides up. I'll have to fill that little thing in if I end up using that. I also don't like wedging clay, by the way. So sometimes I get a little pocket or a bubble or something like that, but we can work with that if we need to. Okay, so I'm gonna get a straight edge. And I'm gonna see a full length of what I can get out of here strip-wise. Okay, I think I'm gonna go about like this. It's about the width of the ruler. So remember, this is kind of like coil building, but it's with strips. Oh, there goes my shaky hand. And so I'm just gonna cut these all identical. They don't need to be identical. I just kind of did that because I could. And I want them to stay hydrated, so I'm gonna put everything in plastic and work with one piece at a time. If this was winter, I could leave them all out, but it is not winter, folks. It is summertime. Okay. These guys are safe. And now I need another bat, guys, because this one has white clay on it. And I want a bat that does not have white clay on it. A clean bat. Okay. All right, so one of the things I do when I make the strips is, and I'll take this out a little farther so you guys can see it, is I soften both edges here. And I just do that with my fingers. This is a very organic process. And if you want more of a rippled edge, you can really kind of lean into that. If you don't, then you could definitely use a small roller to do this. You could use the edge of a fettling knife, which makes a great roller, like that. You could use a small brayer. That also works. And depending on what I'm doing, depends on how I do it. But I want these to have more of an organic shape. And there's a hump in the middle, because the hump in the middle is where I'm going to add the texture. And you know what? Because I am a changeable person, I just changed my mind on what I'm gonna do. So, although I really like that rainbow one, I think that would be better suited to something where I'm not going to be stacking them. So I'm gonna use the MK M roller, and I'm gonna roll it right down the middle. Now, except for the very top one, this part and this part are gonna end up being scored. So I'm okay with it being kind of, you know, uneven like that. And you can go back and do this sort of thing if you want. Okay. Set this guy aside. Here's the back side. And this is a pretty small little base. feels a little thick to me. So I'm just gonna roll it out. And if I continue to go in both directions, I should have somewhat of the same circle. All right, let's do this. So sometimes I do what's called wet scoring. If my clay is not super hard, I just use this nice little serrated rib, and it's dipped in water, and I'm just gonna score the outside edge with it. I did forget that on my first coil I need a flat edge. Gently pushing that on. I'll kind of show you. I'm just pushing that onto the edge there. I'm not really touching the design firmly. I'm just getting the base on. Okay, I'm going to cut this at an angle here and add these two edges together. Little wet scoring here on these. By the way, you didn't see it on camera, but I did score the strip as well. All right, so I'm gonna clean up the outside. I'm just gonna run my finger along it. I need to make sure I'm closing up this part of the seam here. So I'm going to take the back of this wooden tool. I'm going to support the outside of my pot, and I'm going to close that seam up. Also, the beveled cut of that where I connected them gives it more surface area to connect, which is really great. Now, this is a pretty tiny little pot, and on larger pots, I would put a small coil in here. But I don't feel the need to do that on this one. I just want to seal up that edge nice and clean. And then get those score marks out of there. I want to finish the inside of this before I move on to anything else. So I'm just going to nitpick this just a little bit, because once I'm done with the bottom, I'm done with the bottom. So nice and neat and clean. Everything's sealed up. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to make my next strip. And it's buried in plastic. All right. Strip number 2. All right, so again, I'm gonna press the outside. And I'm gonna leave that nice organic shape to it because I want that to show. And there's a hump in the middle. And then I'm gonna use the MKM roller to texture the middle part. And I'll do my best to give this even pressure. Whoa, which is also gonna stretch this out quite a bit. Okay, woo, I gave it a lot of pressure there in the middle. Okay, next up, attaching the next strip. Okay, let's see. Move a few more things in the studio here. I have a very tiny space I work in, and things are often being moved back and forth. Okay, so the idea is I'm gonna wet score the inside of this here. And if wet scoring doesn't work for you, you find you're getting a lot of dripping and stuff, then, you know, just like score like regular and then add a little moisture to it. This clay is not wet enough to just pinch it on. It will pull apart. And then I need to score this edge here. I'm always losing things. All right, it's been a little while since I made one of these, and I just remembered that it's this outer part that I need to score. All right, now I want to very carefully add this in a way where the score marks aren't showing. And then I have a tendency to just kind of tear it, and then I pinch this edge part so that it's thinner. And I'm going to go ahead and score these two parts together. All right, let's go ahead and attach this nice and firm. It's a very fast way to build. There's a lot of different fun things you can do with it. And that's going to be the overlap there. Which I don't need all of that. with a little needle tool. A little moisture. And compress that joint there. Going to go around and pinch this edge a little bit, compress it on there, not really touching the texture part. It's going to make it so it doesn't stick out so much though. All right, now design wise, I can leave this like that, or I can press the roller on it. It's kind of up to you, but does kind of hide that. And it creates a much better joint. Okay, the last thing I like to do is I support the outside of the pot, and with the, you know, some sort of wooden tool that you like, I push that joint together on the inside too. Clay is tricky and it likes to come loose in areas when it's under pressure, whether it's uneven drying or whether it's the kiln. And you don't want to go to all this trouble and have a joint pull apart. Okay, so that is a little tiny pot made out of strips, strip built coil strips, however you want to call it. And the next thing I'm going to do is make some feet for it. Okay, so I'm going to finish up this edge on here, and I'm going to do that by pinching the edge before it gets too dry. And I'm really going to, I'm going to thin it out, not too thin, but I want it to be consistent. And I want to enhance this organic kind of edge here. I like how it has an undulation to it. And if you do find you're getting cracks, add a little moisture. Lastly, I'm just gonna kind of spin this in a circle, see if I can get it back to center. If you have a clay pot that is about the same size, you can put it in there. And that kind of works like this. Where I would put this in here. And this is going to put it back to center. All right, so I'm gonna let this guy firm up a little bit. And while he's firming up, or she, it's actually an it. I'm gonna go ahead and make some feet. Now it is at a point where I can handle it, so I'm gonna take my thumb and just clean up the edge here a little bit. Oh my gosh, so cute. I love it so far. What a cutie pie. Look at that texture on there. Full of human hand mark making. All right, set this guy aside. Now I had some extra strips over here, and I'm gonna make some really simple feet for this. I love elevating pots with feet. I think in many instances, it's the difference between something that looks just like it's kind of stuck on the ground versus something that has a lightness to it and is elevated. The key thing with feet is you got to cut things the same size. So I like to have a little extra clay just in case. And I'm going to cut these in fourths. And then I'll show you how I attach and level the feet. All right, so these are all squares, square-ish, I should say. And what I'm going to basically do is just take them and let's look a little up close here. There we go. And I'm just going to put fingers on each corner. And I'm going to create these little feet here. The trick is I need to start them all in the same spot, like rectangle versus square. I know it seems like it would be about the same, but sometimes they turn out a little bit different. I make all sorts of different feet, but if I'm making an organic pot, I have a tendency to make feet that are of a more organic nature as well. All right, so far so good. I'm going to set these guys aside. I'm going to grab a piece of foam. And a little piece of plastic. So the rim of this is uneven, which means leveling the feet is going to be the most important part on this so it stands nice and straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my feet and place them. And you could do a tri-foot if you want. You could do 3, but I have more luck with 4. So we're going to stick with what I know. And I want to make sure that they're all going lengthwise. I'm going to set them in just a little bit off the edge. And I'm just going to make a couple of marks telling me where these go. Now, generally speaking, I would lightly wrap this pot up for an hour or so and come back later and put these feet on. This pot bottom is very soft, but it's not going to cave in, so I'm not worried about that. Score these guys up. I really don't want a lot of moisture on this because this is already pretty wet. Whoops, I put it on the wrong way, darn it. Very gently, I'm gonna oomph that on there. All right, next one. You don't need to wet both sides. One is plenty. And I want to be careful how much I press that on there. Once I get these all on, I'm going to turn the pot over and put even compression on the outside and on the inside so that they're attached well, but I don't want to push on the bottom right now. Because that would cave in my pot. And fingers crossed I don't have to fix the lid, or the rim rather. Is that right? No, it goes this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, all going the same way. Okay. A little bit of air coming out of that one. That is the sign that it wasn't attached just on its own. Okay, woo, very wet pot. Okay. Now I'm gonna take a nice, clean, soft, damp brush, and I'm just gonna clean up around the edges here. I don't want to add moisture, I just want to seal the edges. And once I do all of this, I'm going to let it set for about an hour and then uncovered, or maybe lightly covered because of the heat, although it's not really that hot in here yet. And then I will come back and do a little bit more refining, and I'll sign the pot. It's a little bit too wet for me to sign the pot right now. Okay, so there's feet. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it on a bat with a little piece of paper, and I'm gonna set those feet on there. And those feet are gonna level out because they're firm damp, so they're soft enough to be self-leveling, but firm enough to not be squished. Now, if this was a large vessel, this would be a much longer process, but this is a little baby vessel. All right, and then lastly, I'm just gonna recenter this a little bit. There we go. Okay, so all done with that little guy. And what I want to do is just kind of show you the pot from another angle. Oops, hopefully you're not getting seasick from this video. All right, you're going to see this again when I do the finish on it.